Hello, I'm Steve Hollingshead. I'm the person responsible for this little slice of London in its all great variety and weirdness. What I'm doing today here is I'm going to attempt to describe all 80 festivals in glorious detail in 30-second bites. I've got some notes because I might lose the plot occasionally, and have a few areas where I haven't got much time to say something probably quite interesting. Just before I start, yes, I appreciate it's not specifically, they're not all technically festivals. They are festivals and events and things. Festivals is like a catch-all term. This sounds better. And to be strictly honest about it, there's probably slightly more than 80 festivals included, because some I've had to mash one or two into one just for continuity's sake, and because I wanted to. Apologies if your own particular festival or favourite event isn't in here. I try to be as broad ranging and interesting as possible. I've got a list here of about 60 events that could have been included, but it would have been a very long film if they had been included. And some I've not been able to include because I've honestly not got sufficient decent images from, or a lot of my pictures are portrait format and don't fit in this shape particularly well, or I've not actually managed to get to the festivals yet. Hello, Pinner. And or don't even know about the festival yet. I don't know everything. So anyway, apologies in advance also if anything here is offensive to anybody. It's not meant to be. I'm trying to be positive about everything. Apologies also if I get something wrong, dates wrong, names of things wrong. This is all going to be straight on the hoof of sail. I've got some notes, but I will be garbling quite a bit. But hopefully you'll glean something from this. So without further ado, let's go back and cue Mr. Circus.
For over 2,000 years, London has been a magnet for conquerors, traders, migrants, refugees, and millions of curious visitors. Throughout this period, the city has assimilated and evolved. It has grown to become one of the great cities of the world, and the legacy of all those centuries of human integration and interaction makes it probably the most, and in the broadest sense of the word, multicultural place on Earth, contributing the greatest variety of culture, of tradition, and of creativity. Over the past 2 decades, Steve Hollingshead has attempted to capture and represent this extraordinary variety in a series of ambitious photographic projects, mainly by walking the streets, seeking out and attending free public gatherings with his black and white film camera. This year, supported by Regent's Place, and as a contribution to the annual Great Get-Together Weekend, an event inspired by the late MP Joe Cox, we present a celebration of a year in the life of a remarkable metropolis. Around the city in 80 festivals.
Okay. Turn the sound down. Sorry, Tim. Let's start Newsday Parade. Number one, this has been going since 1987, apparently, if those people are sleeping throughout most of the day. Combination of American majorettes and marching bands and 32 boroughs of London who are all encouraged to take part for some sort of prize, despite having no budget. The route was swapped from going to Piccadilly to Westminster because American TV audiences wanted it. Pandemonium drums there, by the way. 12th night, end of Christmas, big event on Bankside every year, thanks to the Lions part. There we see the Hollyman arrive, there's Mummer's Play, there's a lot of wassailing, there's the King Bean and Queen P ceremony, and then there's a procession to the George Inn in Southwark for some molly dancing and more festivities. That's kind of associated with Epiphany. Blessing the River is too. That's quite a recent event here. The church is from Southwark Cathedral on the south of the river, London Bridge, and St Magnus the Martyr on the north. They meet in the centre of the river for a small ceremony, a small service, and put a wooden cross into the river. There used to be a church here on that river in medieval times when it was a very different bridge, obviously. Ice Sculpture Festival. This became very popular very quickly, something to do in January. Artists from around the world came to create works out of big slabs of art. Unfortunately, due to climate change, this 4-day festival suddenly became a bit unfortunate because the ice was melting too quickly, really. Here we are, the site of Charles I's execution, 1649, 30th of January. The King's Army section of the English Civil War Society come every year to proceed from the Mall down to Whitehall, where they lay a wreath, they perform other ceremonies, and then they kind of disperse to all the pubs afterwards. Chinese New Year, another massive opportunity to do something early on in the year. It used to be fairly quiet. Chinese came here in the 70s after the post-war Limehouse was a bit blown up, really. It's now a huge event with a big procession at the beginning and very crowded streets for line dancers. A smaller event up in Dalston is the celebration of Joseph Grimaldi, the original clown who died in 1837. All the clowns who are registered clowns come every year for a service. They do a performance for kids, they do some photo opportunities outside, but basically they're commemorating Grimaldi and other of their colleagues that have died over the years. Not far away from there, Stamford Hill, where obviously the big Jewish Orthodox community, they're celebrating Purim in February, which is the celebration of Esther's defeat of Haman. It's one day of the year where they really let their hair down, so to speak. The children go to lots of houses in fancy dress. The adults later on are encouraged to drink. Reclaim Love is a Valentine's Day event curated by Irish poet Venus Kumara. It takes place around Eros, and they encourage us to join hands, fill up the whole circle when there's enough there, and chant, may all the beings in all the world to be happy and at peace. And they're singing and dancing, obviously, and hula hoops as part of this thing. Shrove Tuesday, it's Pancake Day. I've got 3 here. In the morning, there's a parliamentary pancake race taking part between the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and the press. It's usually highly competitive and for rehab charity. Lunchtime over in the city at Guildhall. This is the Interlivery pancake race that's set up by the Poulterers Company in 2004. It's supposed to be all the companies that have associated things to pancakes and eggs, but it's kind of a bit broader than that. That's for the Mayor's charities. In Spitalfields, the Spitalfields pancake race has now moved to Brick Lane, but again, fancy dress, lots of enthusiasm. This is for Air Ambulance. Moving on into February, New Zealand Waitangi Day. This commemorates a famous treaty and now a public holiday in New Zealand. The Kiwis here celebrate by fancy dress again, circle line pub crawl, and converging on Westminster for a big haka outside Parliament. And then carrying on again to find another drinking place, but very fun, very good natured. St Patrick's Day now, a very fixed part of London celebrations. Obviously big Irish community, especially around Willesden, where until fairly recently they were having big St Patrick's Day events with the local community. These days that's kind of been squeezed, so the big parade now is in central London. It's obviously bands and musicians from all over the country and Ireland come for this. Ends up Trafalgar Square with lots of Irish music and Guinness. Holy Festival Colour, which looks spectacular in black and white. The Halika is the night before, where they have a bonfire. The Festival's Colour, each of the colours actually have a different meaning, doesn't mean much here. That's Kingsbury, where the local event was going on. Now, obviously, it's kind of a bit appropriated for colour runs and various other things. In Finsbury Park, this is Kurdish New Year because they celebrate New Year at the beginning of spring, Equinox time. Also Persian New Year, they would be jumping over bonfires, but obviously that's not allowed around here. A lot of dancing. It's quite a political event for the Kurdish, obviously, still without a homeland, but yes, they do like a dance. same event really, Spring Equinox, the Druids come to Tower Hill, which is famous holy site for the Druids, even though these Druids actually don't have any record of what they used to do in the old days. Celtic site, the Bryn Gwyn. So every 21st of March they celebrate Spring Equinox by Tower Hill, and people in the City of London take no notice. I've mashed up two races here, the Varsity Boat Race and the Heather River Race. The last couple to Cambridge Race, basically a drinking session. So people gather at Putney to see off Oxford and Cambridge. Meanwhile, week before, there are something like 400 crews coming the other direction in a timed race where it's a lot more competitive. Easter, I've kind of mixed Christian and some less Christian events in lots going on. Palm Sunday, big event at St Paul's where there's donkeys amongst the congregation, and at Borough Market where Southwark Cathedral and Borough Market combine for their event. And Bromley by Bow, Widow's Son, is an annual ceremony of a hot cross bun being put in the basket by the HMS President sailors. Big cockney knees up, ancient tradition, story worth looking up. Meanwhile, back in Westminster, going down Victoria Street, there's a crucifix parade. That's going from Methodist Central Hall, Westminster Cathedral, links Westminster Abbey as well, and in Trafalgar Square, the Winter's community are putting on kind of big budget Passion of Christ experience twice on Christmas, on Good Friday. Easter Sunday, Saturday night, Easter Sunday overnight on Fleet Street, the Romanian community come to Churches and Dustins at the West, which becomes Orthodox for the Romanian community for an all-night vigil. On Easter Sunday morning, down the road outside St Bride's, they have a very early service so they can go up onto the streets and go egg rolling while there's no traffic, and bacon sandwich afterwards as well, apparently. And on a more frivolous note, Easter Bunny Skate happens in Hyde Park, where the Friday night skate gang dress up as bunnies and other associated characters for a skate around town, and later on egg and the spoon race on wheels. Vaishakhi is a big spring event, New Year for Sikh community and Punjabi community. It's very big for Sikhs. It's a founding of Sikhism as Vaishakhi. Huge praise in Southall and Hounslow and various other places. Martial arts displays, lots of food and drink being handed out, and there's even Trafalgar Square event as well. And there's another mashup here because I wanted to celebrate cosplay, which is becoming a big thing. Science fiction film festival start with a parade of science fiction characters, mostly Doctor Who, and the games, London Games Festival, have characters from games, obviously, which is a big business these days. They end up in St Paul's for a big photo shoot. London Marathon, much to say about that. That's started in '81. Huge event now. I just avoid Canary Wharf if I were you. It's a good place to be, sort of north of Tower Bridge and Bermondsey, Rotherhithe area, or the last bit along Embankment, where these lovely Welsh ladies are coming in after 7.5 hours, supporting Chris Brasher, who invented the event. St George's Day, that's all over London. Obviously, I kind of focused mostly around Southwark Borough Market area, mainly because there's the George Pub, where apparently traditionally Crusaders used to gather, and Borough Market, which has a big St George's Day event. Also, commemorating Mary Markles, who created a St George and Southwark Festival, which brought St George, more multicultural St George and more spiritual version of them as well. It's Catalonian community in London. They are recreating the fantastic Castella Towers that you see all around Catalonia, not quite to the size that you get in northern Spain. These are encouraging people to join in because one day they're hoping to get up to levels of 7-8 story people. Tweed Run is obviously cycle event combining high fashion and modern technology in dressing in tweed and cycling in originally fixed gear bikes, but I think now you can have Santander bikes and others. They basically have a nice day promenade and run town. It's about 1,000 tickets sold out in about minutes. Up to May Day, Jack in the Green is a kind of Victorian Edwardian event. It's an urban event that's been revived by Fowler's Troupe in Deptford and Sarah Crofts. It's chimney sweeps and milkmaids basically that started this, and it does involve drinking, as you might expect, with traditional music and lovely costumes. We're up to middle of May. This is the memorial parade of the Combined Cavalry Old Comrades Association, which has been going for 100 years. The traditions of dressing in city suits, which in those days probably didn't raise an eyebrow, that you don't often see that many bowler hats and pinstripe suits and umbrellas walking in formation. Prince William and Harry took part a couple of years ago. Up to Whitsun, the Canal Cavalcade, organised by the England Waterways Association, taking part in Little Venice, just north of Paddington, and very nice, colourful narrowboats from all around the country gather here to show off their lovely painted pots and pans and a nighttime procession. Still celebrating spring, about now in Brick Lane, it's the Bengali community, Bangladeshi migrants in Brick Lane celebrating Boishaki Mela, which has a big parade and ends up ironically in Weaver's Field, which celebrates the original, one of the early migrants, the Huguenots, to that area. Brick Lane changing massively, obviously. Covent Garden is the home for the Punch and Judy Mayfair and Puppet Festival. This was where Pepys, in 350 years ago, first witnessed Italian puppets performance, and Punch and Judy is said to have sprung from that. There's Maria and her maypole, who turns up everywhere. London's Brighton Mini went down to fantastic Crystal Palace Park, where vintage mini enthusiasts gather for a big drive down to Brighton. They camp overnight. There's about 1,400, 1,500 of them in a convoy, which set a world record at some point. And London Surrey Mini Owners Club. Beating the Bounds is another old tradition, sort of nationwide. It's died out because of maps, because this is all about marking parish boundaries. It's very big around Tower Hill and All Hallows by the Tower. Every 3 years they compete over a boundary, and so it brings out the beefeaters and children bang willow sticks against boundaries. Beltane Bash is, the Pagan Pride Parade is again another spring celebration for the country's pagans, Wiccans, Druids, Shaman. They used to have a big weekend event in Conway Hall. They parade up to Russell Square, a big splash about in the fountains, lots of music and dancing, and some great costumes. Still traditional, we have the Westminster Morris team with their Day of Dance. They invite a dozen teams from around the country to have a day dancing around different parts of Borough of Westminster, and they all mass. There's a one big group in Trafalgar Square at the end for one big dance-off. This is the Prophet's birthday. Because of Islamic calendar, it's different every year here. This is the 3rd month of the lunar calendar, and it's the Milad Nabi celebration of Muhammad's birth. It's the largest procession of this in the country, apparently. Gather outside fantastic Waltham Forest Town Hall and parade around Walthamstow. Down south in Peckham, this is the brainchild of artist Rachel House, inspired by events in New York of, yes, pets dressing up, which is, of course, on quite a bit these days. This was taking part outside the award-winning Peckham Library, Peckham Platform, called Peckham Space, which is arts organisation in a slightly trendy place now. Southwark, Rother Hive is during the big docks era. This Swedish Scandinavian community based here. There was churches and big community here. The Norwegians come back every year on their Norwegian National Day, 17th of May, for a big procession in national costume and a big picnic. Naked Bike Ride has been going on since 2003, would you believe? Now it starts at 8 different starting points. A protest against all dependency and body positivity, and obviously I took pictures from the back rather than the fronts for decency's sake. Anatolian Festival is back in Stoke Newington. There's a big Turkish festival there. This is a celebration of Ottoman culture with marching bands, Ottoman traditional food, and obviously the traditional oil wrestling, which is a massive thing in Anatolian culture. 650 years apparently. Not quite so long as the Waiters Race in Soho, but that was a very big thing in the 50s and 60s. It kind of petered out a bit now, but Soho Village Fete now has made that the highlight of their summer event. Lots of restaurants, obviously, in Soho, all taking part, and ends up with a drink. Also around the West End, but at the same time, is Rath Yatra, which is a Hare Krishna event organised by the Society for Krishna Consciousness. This has been going since 1969, would you believe? These huge chariots are being pulled by devotees through from all the way through Piccadilly down to Trafalgar Square, where again there's a big festival. They queue up 20,000 portions of food being given out apparently. Here in Docklands, another former dock now being used, the Albert Dock next to London City Airport for Dragon Boat Festival. This is a big event in Chinese culture, goes back about 2,500 years. Marks the beginning of the wet season, apparently, where they plant in rice seeds. And it's supposed to be good luck. This is a complicated one. I'll explain briefly. Lady Constant Knowledge, back in 1381, built a bridge across the road to her rose garden, which without planning permission, her fine at the time, because she knew the Lord Mayor, was to pay a rose in perpetuity to the Lord Mayor, which they're still doing, even though it's a bit of a break of a couple of 100 years. A lunch and shoes, no doubt. And Vauxhall and Stockwell, Little Portugal it's called, that's their summer Portugal Day is marked with a big event in Kennington Park, what has been. Massive barbecues, lots of sardines and chicken, Portuguese music and traditional dance. Like many other festivals, have been strapped for cash the last few years, so not really happening much at the moment. Scooter ride out, there's a lot of mods on scooters in and around the country. They do quite a few events. This one is quite a big one. It's been running for over 20 years. They meet up at Regent's Park in a circle, polished up their Vespers and Lamborghinis for the day, and they drive off down to Southend, where they behave themselves, obviously, these days. A great get-together. This is, as we know, inspired and celebrating the late Joe Cox MP. This is one of the biggest picnics. Obviously, they have things happening all around the country. This is one of the biggest ones. It's quite near their main offices. Union Street in Southwark. Very buzzing atmosphere. Lots going on. Looking forward to next year. Again, Scandinavians in Southwark, rather high. Their churches there. The traditional midsummer, which is a very big thing for Swedish, is their maypole and their dances, particularly the little frog dance. Meanwhile, in Hyde Park, a slightly bigger crowd of people doing the same dance in a sort of unofficial gathering, the same festival. They're all individual picnics because it's a Royal Park. They're not allowed to organise an official event. Number 46, Intersummer Pride. Probably the second biggest event in London now after Carnival, which began as a protest, Stonewall protest back in 1972. Now apparently 1.5 million people taking part. It's still highly political, there's lots to protest about and still lots to enjoy though. And it's now spread out throughout the West End really for a whole week of events. a slightly sillier note, pillow fights. That kind of started as part of the sort of flash mob craze back in the early noughties while social media was kicking off. It's obviously now grown into International Pillow Fight Day, which is great if you sell pillows, not so good if you need to clean up Trafalgar Square afterwards. We're up now back to Regent's Park by the bandstand. They have a Summer of Music. This is a special klezmer music festival. Klezmer is a traditional Ashkenazi form of music usually played at weddings. Obviously now it's this great jazz music and lots of fusion involved. But still, traditional dancing around the deck chairs. Meanwhile, over in Clerkenwell, which was a big Italian community in sort of like 19th and early 20th century, the church is still there, and every year they still have their Church of the Pieces have their Our Lady of Mount Carmel procession around the streets, and all the Italians come back for the Sacra street party involving obviously lots of pizzas, Peroni, and dancing. Coin Street is basically it's down to Coin Street that there are events happening on the riverside, because back in the 80s they battled against developers to keep the place a community space. They were the first people to have community events on the river, and they look after special events for capital age, for elderly, refugee week. They also have events, Colombians, Cubans, Turkish, varying sizes. And because of them, the riverside really exploded into life after that. Down in Battersea, Sumo Run, there's quite a lot of charity runs around. Sumo Run is one of the more fun ones. Obviously, lots of sumo runners running around. It's an 8 kilometre run, a 5 kilometre run, sorry. So it's not messing about. Apparently they won this world record for the largest number of people running in sumo suits, which must be a very competitive thing to win. Bastille Day, this first happened in London in Borough Market in 2008, when basically Francophiles wanted to celebrate French National Day. They stormed Borough Market. After a couple of years, the market got more involved. It became a much bigger event. The French community got very enthused. Now the market's not quite so interested, so looking for a new home. Another ancient tradition, the Vintage Procession, which is a bit bizarre because it's quite short. That is from the worship company of Vintners, north of Southwark Bridge, who proceed to their church after naming their new master for the year. The sweeps is traditionally clearing the streets of mess, and they carry poses to ward off the horrible fumes. More recently, Chap Olympiad, which Gustav Temple from Chap magazine started to coincide with the Greek Olympics in 2004. Now it's a very big event in Bloomsbury, and lots of silly events taking place, including umbrella jousting, cucumber discus, anything as long as it's not too competitive, because they are gentlemen after all. Another big thing on the South Bank, outside the National Theatre, for many years, theatre space outside the theatre had 2 months of summer events, cabarets, performance, that's the Gandini's juggling troupe, taking part in events in all weather. Big performance space got closed down when they redeveloped the whole theatre area, so now we have a performance area outside the understudy bar called Riverside Stage, where they have music and performance. Brompton World Championships is part of the Prudential Ride London in August. Basically take over St James's Park. You have to wear non-lycra to dress up for the event. It's a dash to Brompton, unload it, 8 laps of the park, and the first person to cross the line stops the race, keeps the Brompton, apparently. This is hopefully going to come back. This was a fantastic Latin American community in Walworth Elephant Castle, as people know. Every August would have a huge parade down the Walworth Road, and their communities from Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, Bolivia, all in their national costumes, down the Walworth Road, down to Burgess Park, where they have a big festival. Unfortunately, the redevelopments and the changes around elephants are making this more unlikely it's going to happen to that degree again. Over in West London, Gunnersbury Park, probably now Southall, I think it's moved to. It's the biggest Mela in London, biggest South Asian community festival in London. All communities take part, and there are different music stages for each different taste in music. Parades, processions, it's Nepalese even. Emergency exit arts, who did a lot of good work. In Vauxhall, which has a tradition for decadence going back to 18th, 19th centuries, is now home to a big gay community. Royal Vauxhall Tavern being at the heart of it. They have an annual sports day to raise money for gay men's health projects, or Hero, maybe recently. Lots of silly games, including the 50-metre mints. This is a big thing. Town chariot processions take over. Ealing, big chunk of the Uxbridge Road for the day. They proceed as thousands of ladies in saris and incense pots on flame, walking backwards the whole route. It's hugely noisy and colourful as it looks in black and white. And yes, they roll the whole route holding coconuts, these devotees. Notting Hill Carnival, it's quite a little gathering in Notting Hill. So yes, 50 or 60 years been going and had lots of controversy over the years. It's still the biggest and best carnival in Europe, 2.5 million people, including Elvis. For great costumes, great food. Just don't drink too much because there's not enough toilets. And there's still a West Indian community hanging on in there. In September now, Great River Race is a great boat race now. It's for traditional boat races. Any boat race can enter, but they've got to be rowed. They have to have a cox, a passenger, and a flag. It's 21 miles from Greenwich to Ham, and 300 boats taking part, all sorts of shapes and sizes. Horseman Sunday, there's some stables just north of Hyde Park in what's called Tyburnia. The church there, St John's, has, until very recently, had a church service for equestrians where about 100 people on horses and horse and carts come along for an outdoor service. This, at the same time, Thames Festival, peak of summer, really, end of summer, huge event. It developed from a tiny event in the beginning of the century. Under very tight budgets, they do fantastic things. Feast on the Bridge, Night Procession, Song for Water, Firing on the Foreshore, international performances. Now it's spread out more. It's totally Thames, involving the whole of the length of Thames and including all local boroughs to do their own bits. But the Night Procession, deeply missed. Back to Trafalgar Square, another one of their big events in it's Japanese Matsuri. Interesting combination here, mixture of traditional performances and dance and events on stage, and a crowd with celebrating young Japanese trends, and there's cosplay and manga wall, and of course taiko drummers. Great Gorilla Run, we are now into September, and the Great Gorilla Run started in 2002 apparently, obviously raising money for mountain gorillas. Basically you get to raise some money, keep your costume, make it as interesting as you like, and run cross the river a few times, get very hot, and a bit of a party later on. The heads don't stay on all the time. Harvest Festival time, and now we're into a slightly complicated story of Pearly Kings and Queens. There's a big event in the Guildhall for Harvest Festival, which is the Pearly Kings and Queens Guild attend this, where they proceed from Guildhall to Bow Church, traditional Bow Bells Church, for Harvest Festival ceremony. Meanwhile, at St Martin in the Fields, just off Charing Cross, these are the genuine or original Pearly Kings and Queens who do the similar thing, raise money for charity at St Martin in the Fields. Over in Billingsgate, near Billingsgate Market, meanwhile, they have a Harvest for the Seas festival, and that hat is a bobbin, by the way, made of leather. October, it's the beginning of the legal year, the Lord Chancellor's Breakfast, it's called. They start off Royal Courts of Justice, go to Westminster Abbey for a service, praying for guidance, and then head across the road with big security to the House of Lords for breakfast, or what they call breakfast. Africa, there's not enough African events going on in the capital, really. I've just got really two big ones. Africa in the square, obviously Trafalgar Square. But there's a big Africa centre has now moved to South London. They're beginning to stretch out a bit there. They put on a couple of very big events, showcasing new talent coming through. October Plenty, here's a Lions Pass again with our other sort of centrepiece of the autumn. This brings the Berryman now turns up with performances from, let's see, Fabularium. There's an execution of John Barleycorn, where he doesn't get hurt, honestly, and the Corn Queen gets ripped apart. There's the now taking part at Boots and Shoes in Kennington last year. There are conkers there, and there are conkers here, which haven't been banned in school, apparently. They're still healthy things to throw at each other. This is at Parliament Hill. They've been doing this for about 18 years. Highly competitive conker championships, different age categories. Nearly 400 people took part a couple of years ago, which was a world record at the time. And you get to win golden conker, apparently. Another very colourful event, which looks like Grace in Black and White, Diwali, Festival of Lights. Again, financial constraints, this big procession up through Wembley. Not sure if that happens anymore. But in Trafalgar Square, they have a very big event, especially with a Garba band. And the Garba is this fantastic dance where you move around in a circle, starting very slowly, end up dancing very quickly. And of course, there's the Diwali lanterns now, which are now provided by iPhone. Also, a bit of a cheat here to events, but I've not included zombies, this thing, because zombies don't really count for Halloween. This is Halloween celebrations. It's the Easter Bunny skate people doing their autumn run, getting on the skates at night time and going around the city and the West End. And meanwhile, the next day, it's All Souls Day, Day of the Dead, which is becoming more and more popular as a thing to do. And here I've got a mixture of different events here from Point Street, British Museum, the V&A, and a popular March of the Dead event, which hasn't been happening for a few years. Dios de las Muertas. Now it's November, we've got the Vintage Car Run, and this, you've got very early in the day for, starts at 7 o'clock in Hyde Park. And it commemorates 1896, the raising of the speed limit to 14 miles an hour. All of the vehicles have got to be no older than 1905, and they struggle through the town, across Westminster Bridge, down through South London to Brighton. 75, one of the more bizarre events in the London calendar, but it's huge and popular, and has been going on for 700 years, possibly. Lord Mayor's Show, a mixture of corporate and community and charities and military, some fantastic costumes, always pick the wettest day of the year for some reason, but they do two processions. The Lord Mayor is announced each year. There's the Lord Mayor for that year. It's different from the Mayor of London, obviously. It's one of my personal favourites, what gets in here. There's Handlebar Club, is the moustache Club, and the Great London Pipe Club get together every now and again for a dance match. Sadly, the pub they used to have it in, Windsor Castle, fantastic pub near Marylebone, is no more, but the Handlebar Club still carries on. Moving into December, Christmas Pudding Race. This has been going on for about 40 years in Covent Garden. Lots of different teams run assault course with various costumes and themes, and raising money for cancer research. I think it's a Toy Story thing for that bunch. Tuba Carols are a flash mob that collects money for a children's charity, who gather, basically put the call out. If anybody's got a tuba or euphonium or device of similar nature, they sit down on chairs outside St Paul's and do Christmas carols. And very nice it is too, amongst the chaos that's going on around that time of year. Another great event in Greenwich, happening in the middle of December, the Pantomime horse race. It starts just north of the docks of the riverside. Again, charity raising, lots of teams dressed up as in pantomime horses, lots of pubs visited. This has been going for 10 years. Hopefully, chap organising it can keep it going a bit longer. And finally, we get Santacon, which for all its reason controversy is still a very jolly event. It's not just for people to get hideously drunk, although that obviously happens. The chap organising this is worried that they don't have enough volunteers now, so this day is maybe numbered, but it is a good way to end the sequence. Merry Christmas, end of the year, go out the fireworks. Thank you. And thank you, Tim, for the music, which you can't hear very much. So that's it, and roll credits. These are lots of charities that have been so far. There are probably other charities that I've included in this thing. There are probably more. Obviously, it's been put together for the Great Get Together, a celebration of communities, which I hope this is kind of showing all different types of communities. And yes, especially thanks to Rose, Chris, particularly Kath for putting up with it all. And yeah, and everybody that's taken part, done things, gone out there, dressed up, gone to the streets. Otherwise, this would be a very short little film. That's it. I think I haven't got to it. Thank you, and goodbye.